It's now 5:10. We'll call this meeting to order. I'll do a roll call for the Planning Commission. Commissioner Hogan,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Scott,
Here.
and was Commissioner Poppins going to join on the phone, or did we? Nothing, okay. And Commissioner Enstead is on his way. And Commissioner Jungling's here. All right, with that, we'll do business. Dobie?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and boards. I appreciate everyone taking the time this evening to join us. I got a couple items for the agenda for the work session that we're going to do tonight. First thing is put together a little PowerPoint of the building activity over the past year. And then the second part of this is a work program that we typically do. Last year, of course, we did not conduct a joint Planning Commission Board of Commissioners work session due to the pandemic. But this year, we're going to update the work plan for the Planning Commission. And then the third thing is I just have an application that I want to propose to you guys to talk a little bit about. And then after that is really the purpose of tonight's meeting is for the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners, to really have a dialogue or a discussion amongst each other about some of the development trends that we've been experiencing in Lincoln County so far this year and what we anticipate for next year. So with that, I'll just start off the PowerPoint. So this year, of course, as you know, has been a successful year as far as development activity within Lincoln County. I should start out by saying too, is that up at the table with me tonight is our staff. So Jen Cleveland is our administrative assistant. Jen's actually a shared position with GIS, so I call her my half-time employee because I get her half of the time, but I probably dominate most of that. But she's shared with our GIS department as far as handling some of those administrative functions. And this is Joel, and Joel Carlson. He is our building inspector / code enforcement officer. So he handles building permit review, code review, and then handles inspections as well. Our third employee, Keith Holter, is not here tonight. He was sick today. But Keith Holter is also our building inspector / code enforcement officer. And I think, and I'll put them all on the spot, but I think Jen's been here 4 years. Boy, time flies. And Joel, I know, has been here 2 years, 3 years. Boy, I wasn't good at math. That's why I'm a planner, but yeah. So, but starting out with this, so again, it's been a very productive year for development activity within the unincorporated area of Lincoln County. And of course, again, the planning and zoning department for the county, we're responsible for the administration of the planning ordinances, the comprehensive plan within the unincorporated area, which I call the rural area, which is outside of the city corporate limits. So this year, again, this is kind of a trend that we've been experiencing over the last few years, is that we typically have more non-residential permits. And non-residential, I lump agricultural permits in there as well. And so then residential generally is just our residential new house starts, and then also add-ons, remodels, and those different types of activities. And so what's of note this year is that we did have a 14% increase over last year in our non-residential permits. That's our commercial industrial permits. But also of note is we did have a 6% increase in agricultural permits from 2020. And so that was a significant increase that we had, and a trend that is moving forward with that. What I would also say to that is this is probably the first year that we had some kind of value-added agricultural permits as well. So we had the methane burner down at the dairy, and then we've had some other of those types of what I'll call kind of value-added agricultural permits. Value of construction. So this is your how much the cost of construction is. And so this number here is, and I like to say is every year it goes up, but this year we saw it was over a 50% increase in the total value of construction over last year and what we saw. And really that's, first and foremost is what you see up here is the staff that's processing and facilitating these permits. But these numbers are really the investment of the private sector in Lincoln County. These are the people that are out there building the businesses and building the houses. And so this is really, this number really reflects those people's investment and confidence in the unincorporated area of Lincoln County to invest in it. But over last year, we saw about an 8% increase in residential construction cost. And I would like to say that, the question is going to be, is that inflation related or is that just general? And what I would say is just what we've been seeing is that we're seeing larger houses. We're seeing larger projects. We're seeing, typical. So it's not just what I would call just inflationary type reasons. I think it's also because we're just seeing larger projects in general, larger houses. But what's more surprising is that we saw a 119% increase in those non-residential construction costs. And that was a pretty significant, but again, I would say the same thing is I don't think that's really inflationary reasons. I think what we're seeing is larger buildings, larger projects that are occurring within the unincorporated area of the county. As far as this is development permit fees. This would be the revenue associated with the different applications we have. This first slide is really our building permits. So when you're in Lincoln County, we require anything that's really a structural change to the building or a new construction that does require a building permit. So this is a reflection of that. So fees collected for just residential, this would be new starts, and it would also be add-ons, remodels, and things like that. Was about 71,000. Non-residential was 173,554. And again, that coincides to what you saw in the previous slides, that we're having more non-residential development than residential development. And then floodplain permits, about 1,300, and other permits, which is our pools and signs and zoning, was about 1,446. And so again, yep.
Toby, who sets those fees, or how are they determined?
Yep, so that's a good question. Those fees were set when we adopted building code. And so those are set by the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, like how long ago?
We adopted the 2018 code, I believe, last year.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
We adopted it last year, but it became effective June 1st of this year. Correct.
okay.
But if I recall, and Joel will correct me if I'm wrong here, but the change that we had between the previous ordinance and this current ordinance, the only thing we modified was the commercial side of it, as far as the percentage of what we charged for based on construction percentage of it.
And is that what it is? It's based on a percentage of what the value, or what?
For commercial, yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so, but again, this was a significant increase in over what we had. This dollar amount here is about $100,000 more than it was previously in 2020. So there's some significant permitting that's going on in the county. As far as other application fees, so this is outside of our building permit fees. So for conditional uses, we $11,500, and again, that's on a $250 application fee. And then on rezones, which is a $350 application fee, that was $3,600. And then plats was $23,725. And that's for what we call minor plats and subdivision plats. So minor plats is any division of land they're required to submit a plat to go through the process. And then the preliminary plans is any time we did a subdivision was part of that process there. And I should say, I'll go back to this one here. For building permit fees, this is all in-house work, except we do on commercial projects. By ordinance, we send them to a code review, and that gentleman's out of Rapid City. But so all of this primarily stays in-house, and this is all internal staff except for commercial permits. And it's not all of them. I think we do some remodels that we keep in-house on that one. But on these ones, all of this, of course, is in-house staff except for plats. And plats we do send to our designated, the IMEG, to review these. And so part of this fee does go to their review of it, of that. And then plan developments, we did have 2 of those this year. That was $800. So this gets down into a little bit more of what those individually were. So this year, and I should say this year to date, we haven't included all of this data is just through the end of November. So we don't have December data put in here yet. But as of November, we had 47 conditional use permit applications. Of that 47, 45 were approved. 6 of those were within the joint jurisdictional area of Sioux Falls. And then we had 11 rezoning applications that were filed within the calendar year of 2021. 5 of those were approved, 2 of those were denied. 1 was referred to a vote, which was ultimately failed. And then we have 3 that are awaiting being set for public hearing and approval by the County Board of Commissioners. 1 of those will be within the joint jurisdictional area. And then I put this number in here. So last year during the pandemic, the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Commissioners was trying to keep the number of people within the room low. So we did, there was a number of times where we had 3 or 4 applications, but we staggered those so that they weren't all in one meeting. And so some of those did carry over to 2021. So technically, total this year, the board did approve, it would be 16 of those in total that was approved. And then this slide's the more of the interesting part as we move forward, is that this is in 2021, and this is what I'll call conversion of agricultural land. So the predominant land use in Lincoln County for the unincorporated area is agriculture. But each development that we have, or each annexation, that takes away agricultural lands for development. And so this year, the city of Harrisburg annexed 574 acres within the corporate limits. The city of T annexed 91 acres. And the city of Sioux Falls annexed 119 acres. When you total up all of the rezonings that the Board of Commissioners has approved this year, we've rezoned or converted approximately 424 acres away from agricultural. And then as a comparison, all of last year, and I would say previous trend back, is last year we rezoned 7 acres of land. So this year we rezoned 424. And then we've also, what I'd also add to that is we have 3 pending applications, which will be approximately 80 acres. So potentially you're going to have the county converting approximately 500 acres this year.
And you said typically it's like 7?
I'd say last year was 7, but typically it's not over 100. So
Less than 100?
yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, what I would say is going to be the interesting thing is when you look at this type of a number here is that sets us up for the next year to conditional uses and preliminary plans and development plans and building permits. You know, it's a staggering number when you think of all of that different activities that are going to be, you know, subsequent to this happening, I guess, in the county. And so that's really a quick kind of nuts and bolts of where we're at with development permits and everything this year. And certainly all of these numbers as far as building permits, those are all available on our website. So we list out every month. We do a month closeout, and Jen actually works on that. And we show what the permit was and the activity that's associated with it. But it's very interesting, even for myself, every year when we take a look at when we get to the end of it, and you think, wow, there's a lot of activity and a lot of things that are occurring in the county with what we're doing. So if I can get out of there. Any questions on that?
I have a question, but it kind of pertains to that, kind of doesn't. Do you guys have an idea of how much undeveloped industrial and commercial land, or land that's already zoned for industrial or commercial that is undeveloped in the county is?
I don't have a number for you, but
Is there a way to figure that out?
yeah, we could certainly do that.
I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah. I would say that it's probably not as much as you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But any other questions or anything you'd like to see in the future as far as development statistics or numbers or any of that, or? Can you flip it to the overhead ones? So one other number that I put together that was kind of interesting, I thought, was, so this is the total acreage. So in Lincoln County, we have 369,761.7 acres of total acreage in the county. Sioux Falls accounts for approximately, this is in their Lincoln County portion, approximately 8,700 of that. Harrisburg is 2,991, and if you saw back that you saw that previous slide that they've annexed approximately 500 acres. Well, for the last 2 years, they've increased their total acreage by about a quarter. You know, that's a significant amount of annexation that they're doing. T is about 2,395, and you go down the list there. So that leaves the unincorporated area of approximately 351,000 acres, which is our responsibility in that part of it. The other thing that I thought was interesting was, so this is the census statistics for Lincoln County. And so the total population in 2020 is 65,161. That's a numeric change of that 10-year period of 20,333, which, about maybe once a week, someone will say, well, look at your comprehensive plan. It's, you undercounted what you're at now. And I think it's more fascinating to keep it and look at it to say that we're under accounting approximately 10,000 every decade in that part of it. So that's, how do you track that, or how do you anticipate that kind of growth? But the other part about that too is you can see, which is logical, is that our population density, because of our population increase, is becoming greater. So which means it's more of our urbanization and different types of things there. So. But the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is a work plan. And so, and we did this previously in 2000, I think it was 2019. But essentially what the Planning Commission work plan is different activities that the Planning Commission staff will work on. And so first and foremost is the Planning Commission's responsible for holding hearings, reviewing applications, and deciding on things as conditional use permits unless appealed. And then on rezonings, they're responsible for giving a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. And then as far as amendments to the ordinances, are also to give a recommendation of those amendments to the Board of Commissioners. And so that'll be their primary focus, but a couple of, or some items that I think that I've jotted down, and this is really an open discussion about if this is a good idea, a bad idea, or if there's additional things. But the first thing is, for ordinance amendments, is I put on here to adopt permanent standards for medical cannabis. So if you recall, within the unincorporated area, we adopted temporary ordinances for medical cannabis. And so at some stage, we'll need to enact a permanent regulation for that. And so as we've gone through this process and had some applications and inquiries, I think staff has some ideas about ways to streamline or ways to adjust some of the ordinances we have. But again, now that we're going through this and we're going to adopt a permanent regulation, it's a good time to get public input on kind of their thoughts and processes on this too. So any questions on that or comments or? Okay.
Do you know, Toby, when you're thinking of bringing that permanent one forward on cannabis?
I think,
Some pizza con.
part of it is to see kind of what the legislature does, to see if they do anything. I mean, one of the reasons we adopted temporary is because we wanted to see what the legislature was going to do. And the other part of this too is, if you recall, Lincoln County was really the first jurisdiction in the area to adopt regulations for medical cannabis. And so when staff went through the joint process to look at that, and then we've looked at other jurisdictions, there's little tweaks that, of course, any legislation you can make tweaks to. But in saying that, it's a policy, and it needs to be recommended by the Planning Commission, needs to be acted by the Board of Commissioners. Staff's just here to provide you some reference and some ideas about what implications are of it.
Toby, aren't we one of the few counties that have vertical integration when it comes to licensing? Well, we took into growing, dispensing, manufacturing, and all of that.
We're one of the only counties that allows all four uses. Yeah. It's a little complicated when it gets to the vertical integration part of it, but we're one of the only counties, and we're one of the only counties that allows cultivation. And so we're getting a lot of requests for cultivation, which is the Board of Commissioners did approve one license already for a cultivation type facility. But we do allow cultivation in the agricultural district. Again, we're one of the only counties that does allow that. The second item is to consider amendments to building eligibility regulations. And so what we've seen over the last, what I'm going to say, few months is a lot of transfers of building eligibilities. And I think that at least the Planning Commission seems to have concerns about the process of how that works, about where's it going to be placed at, and how is this going to work. And I think a lot of the public has shown up at the meetings as well and called staff and asked questions about, well, I didn't know this was here, and how come this is here now, and how come it's moving. But as a bigger, broader approach to that, is I'd like to throw out is, so for those of you that don't know, but the county adopted density zoning in 1995. And the density zoning essentially established one building per quarter. And so prior to 1995, you could come into the planning and zoning office and obtain a building permit if you owned an acre of land and construct a house on it. But 1995, they restricted it to one per quarter. At the same time, the county also said, well, there's some existing platted lots from 1970s, 80s. Now we've got one back to Schindler, back to the 1800s. But so the county wanted to preserve those, and so they did, and they called those lots of record. And so almost every day we find a lot of record out there that exists. And so we're seeing a lot of development, and we're seeing a lot of those building eligibilities being used, I think, more so than in the past. But one of the things that we're hearing a lot from the public is that it's changing the rural character. You know, for the first time, I think we're hearing the public talk about what a rural character is and what it looks like in Lincoln County. And so is that just any developments altering the rural character, or is it just the rural character of changing away from agricultural activities? And so that's something that we don't know. I mean, we'd have to have discussions and dialogue with the public about that. But one concept would be is many counties in South Dakota either went, and Minnesota and Iowa as well, there was two paths that they took. They either took a path of building eligibilities, which is one per quarter, or they took a path to large lot zoning. And the large lot zoning says you got to have 20 acres, and then you can have a building eligibility, or you can build a house on it. Much different than our process, where it's typically an acre lot and they have an eligibility on it. Large lot zoning would, in many ways, it avoids some of the issues we have with, impacts as far as screening and things like that. You know, when you're building a house on 20 acres, it's not like you're building one 7 foot away from the adjoining property lot line. And so it avoids some of those things. It also maintains the character, because 20 acres, that's farming, you know, that's agriculture on those types of parcels and those different types of things. So that's one thing that we can have a dialogue about and discussion about, you know, is that an alternative, or does building eligibilities, you know, is that something that's preserving our rural character? And then there's many people that say, why do we have building eligibilities to begin with? Why can't I just use my land for what I want to use it for? If I want to sell it for development or for someone to build a house on, that's up to them too. So but with that, I guess, is there any questions or thoughts on that idea, concept?
Yeah. So this is something that Toby and I have talked about, and I think it's one of the things that we're seeing on the planning commission is we're getting a lot of these requests. It's kind of a three-part thing. We're getting a lot of requests to transfer these housing eligibilities or building eligibilities. Some of these folks are getting pretty creative, and they're buying an acre of land here so they can move it from this place to across the road, and so on and so forth. And me personally, there's just something about that doesn't feel right. I don't think that was the intention for the one per quarter is to take a bunch of housing eligibilities, basically build a housing eligibility bridge to another piece of land, and then basically what we end up with is a small mini rural development that isn't a rural development. And those we have some concerns with as well. And so I think we need to have a little more discussion about that, because that's been the backdoor way around this. And I think we need to have some definitions on, and maybe take a deeper look into this transferring of eligibilities. The housing or the building eligibility thing in general, I think we all see that's taken off in Lincoln County. And it's starting to create some problems, at least in my area, in the rural areas, because you go to bed one day and 2 days later you wake up and there's something been for sale across the road, somebody's building a house and nobody knew anything. Versus if we wanted to build a hog building or a feedlot or a lot of other things, there would be, because it's conditional use permitting, we'd have a time of public comment and notification and so on and so forth. And since housing eligibilities are just a permitted process, the neighbors never get notified for that. And some of the conversations that I've had with people in the rural areas anyhow is we have a lot of things in place to protect existing acreages from animal agriculture or any kind of development, but there isn't really anything to protect us from acreages. And I'll give you an example. I farm and have kids involved, and say we were to buy a piece of land that gave us all the setbacks to have a feedlot or some kind of hog building or so on and so forth. And we get that whole process done and buy it, and the next day somebody purchases the housing eligibility across the road, we no longer meet the setbacks and can't do it, right? There's no protection. So I don't know what the answer is, but some of my ideas are, I would like to see personally the whole housing eligibility thing go to more of a conditional use process or some kind of a process so we could at least have public comment on it, because we're getting a lot of these acreages just dropped on people and nobody knows. I'm not saying that they wouldn't happen or that we stop them. I just think that it would be healthy to be able to have conversation amongst neighbors. And I could give you, well, I won't go into them right now, but I can give you a lot of examples of things that are happening currently. And there's some contentious issues in the country right now based on this just because people didn't know. No different than if I was going to build a feedlot across the road from somebody and nobody got a chance to talk about it. You can imagine that that would be very contentious as well. So I think that's I would like to see something where we can make it, have public comment and notification. And then I'm not so sure as we shouldn't have some kind of, explore some kind of setbacks for acreages. I don't like the way, personally, in a lot of these areas where we're just stacking acreages on acreages on acreages right in a line, and they're right next to each other, and I don't think that they look very rural, and I think that from a township standpoint, and even policing from our county sheriff's department and things like that, as we continue to do that, it looks to me like without some thought that we're gonna end up having issues going forward. So I think that's where not only setbacks from existing farming operations, but setbacks from existing acreages, I think makes some sense personally. So those are some things I guess that we've been talking about. I've had a lot of conversations with Toby. We wanted to visit with you guys and get your opinion, and see if anybody else shares some of the same concerns.
Scott, if I may, one of the ways in which some of landowners that have prevented CAFOs from being developed is that very same thing that you've talked about. They have everything, and somebody will sell an eligibility, and then they are no longer meeting the proper setbacks. The other thing is, I think we have to set a tone here, because realtors, when they sell land, will always use eligibilities as one of the selling tools that they have. Mm-hmm. You know, I just had 80 acres that sold, and it wasn't the 80 acres they were advertising, it was the 2 setbacks or the 2 eligibilities that they had. So when you take those 2 eligibilities and you take the 2 eligibilities that were sold about 6 months before, now we got 4 houses. Mm-hmm. So we got, and the impact on the township roads are something that we have to be more sensitive to, I think.
I think,
Thanks, Jim.
In addition to what Eric said about the agricultural part of it, I think it's just other acreages too that are saying,
right.
Hey, I didn't know this was going to be coming right next to me, another house, that I anticipated that
Yep.
I was going to be living out in the rural area, and now I've got a neighbor right next to me, and I think so. It's not just an agricultural issue; it's just in general a rural issue about what it is.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of the feedback I'm getting personally is just what Toby's saying. It's from existing acreage people right now that, I mean, I think there's something terrible the matter when a realtor can list, basically just sell a housing eligibility, put it on the market. It doesn't have to be replatted. Nothing has to be set aside. They can just sell it, and well, if it sells, great. If it doesn't, whatever. There really is no investment on the landowner for that. And so if a neighbor sees it for sale, they can't even really come in and say, well, you know, what's this plat look like? Because it doesn't have to be replatted. And we ran into one in Lynn Township where the landowner had 3 housing eligibilities left, just listed them all, sold them all, and then kind of got into a pickle because the township wouldn't sign off on the plats. And that was one way around it. Okay, I mean that's one thing the townships can do, but I think if we rethink that process a little bit, it doesn't have to go that far, you know. And I'm not against housing, you know, acreages or housing eligibilities. I just think that with the increased demand that we have right now, I think it's something that we have to pay attention to, so that it doesn't become a problem 20 years down the road. And I do think that there's a better way of doing it than what we're currently doing it right now.
You know, Eric, we have incredible demand right now for, and I think it's primarily driven by jobs in Sioux Falls, and people want to have a rural acreage lifestyle. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that part out, right? I think that is by and large what's driving most of this, not all of it. You know, you've got a couple different issues at play. You've got the joint jurisdictional area controlled by both Sioux Falls and Lincoln County. Sioux Falls wants to see growth roll from the north to the south. You have a number of landowners, though, in the joint jurisdictional area, you know, north of 106, extending all the way up to Sioux Falls, who want to develop their land as well, but they're being throttled by the city of Sioux Falls, who doesn't want that to develop, which I think is short-sighted as well. And I mentioned this to Sioux Falls City planners when they were here, as well as when I've met with them. And so what you're going to continue to see then is people going outside of that joint jurisdictional area, i.e. the rest of the county, and they're going to do what they're doing, which you just explained to everybody. They're going to look for those acreages to buy, and then they're going to impinge upon other rural areas. And, you know, people get sick of me preaching about the joint jurisdictional area, but it is prime and ripe for growth. And we've got to go through the understanding that that is a rural area that has to develop faster and quicker than what the city of Sioux Falls wants it to. You know, they want to control that growth, but what they've got to understand is, and what we've got to enter into a action plan with them about, is it's going to develop not only from the north down, but from the south up.
Sure.
And growth in the southern end of that joint jurisdictional area is going to look different than the cookie cutter approach you see coming from Sioux Falls moving down south. And so, you know, what I've been proposing for quite a while is you're going to see larger lots, larger lot size, and you're going to see, you know, developments out there, 40, 60 acres that may have about 20 to 25 houses on them. Now, one of the big concerns right now, of course, is drainage issues. And that's proposed in one of the amendments here, is to align the, you know, the drainage permit process with our master drainage plan. And so what happens is you've got some of our rules and some of our concerns that are preventing that growth and development from happening. And it's kind of like a balloon. You squeeze one side of the balloon, what happens next? Pops out on the other side. And I think that's what I see with growth and development too, is we're squeezing or constraining some areas through this artificial rules and growth prohibitions. And then what does it do? It comes out on the other side where it may be even less desirable. So we gotta have a real discussion as a county and as a team about our policy of where do we want to project growth? Where is it most likely to occur? You know, because that will, I believe, take some of the pressure off of people wanting to buy those acreages. It won't solve it. I mean, really, the only way to solve it would be to do a prohibition, and probably is unconstitutional. But one of the ways to relieve that pressure is we've got to work with our partners, especially City of Sioux Falls, and we've got to impress upon them that we've got huge demand for growth. And one of the places where it could go is the joint jurisdictional area. And we've got to have a forward-looking, more visionary policy about you can't stop the growth, but you can control it. And I think, you know, because right now, as you're saying, we're overcome by events. The marketplace is just steamrolling us, and pretty soon we're going to end up with this checkerboard creation, and we will have lost control of it.
So that's, and thanks. So that brings up another point that we've had discussion in our meetings, are these rural developments. And what does that look like? And if I hear what you're saying, if I hear what you're saying is that you would be in favor, or you think we should be in favor of continuing these rural developments as they move up and eventually connect with Sioux Falls. My personal opinion, I think some of the opinions of the commission, I guess a few of these we've been voting on lately, is we're scared to death of them because they aren't part of a municipality that will eventually become a part of a municipality, and then the municipality is going to have to deal with turning this thing into how they wanted it, you know, curb, gutter, sewer, drainage, so on and so forth. And so my thought has been not just Sioux Falls, and that's fine if Sioux Falls isn't keeping up with the growth, but I mean, they're not the only municipality in Lincoln County. I mean, Harrisburg obviously just annexed 500 and some acres this last year. That's another one. Canton, Worthing, Lennox, I mean, all these municipalities are set up for this growth, in my opinion. And I think we should encourage the growth there versus just starting rural development somewhere in the middle of the county and then growing it from there towards the cities. Because each one of these rural developments, it's interesting when they come in and ask for them, they have put zero thought into, well, what happens when the next 160 acres gets developed. We've got one up by T right now where there's no roads that connect the thing. So you think about that when that becomes a municipality, the problem with fire service, with ambulance, with law enforcement. And now, if we go back and we really take a look at those rural developments and put some of those things in line that say, okay, if you're going to do this, this is what you have to do to prepare to be part of a municipality in the future, I think that would be something that would be extremely smart.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And just so you know, my comments are only geared towards the joint jurisdictional area. Because I consider the joint.
Which is
It
106.
go, basically 106 north and between Highway 11 and Minnesota Avenue.
Okay.
That's just rough shorthand, of
Right.
course. So first of all, my comments are only geared towards the joint jurisdictional area. And second of all, I wholeheartedly agree with your last comment there that if we start to make those developments, engage in the kind of growth and development that what the municipalities are going to look like, that's exactly what I'm talking about doing. And I think that takes the strain, because we've already got a housing shortage.
Yeah.
We've got a housing shortage, and people are going to keep growing. And what I don't want is the rural character and people crowding out, you know, not saying for CAFOs or against CAFOs, but I don't want people crowding those kinds of agricultural activities out. And if we don't give people a place to grow, you know, if we don't create a sandbox, what are kids going to do, right?
Right.
They're going to go play on the road. Well, we don't want the kids playing on the road. We want to put them in the sandbox, and we want to give them directions and guidance and rules on what to do. And that's why I fully concur with your last comment there. I also agree, we can't just set up rural developments out in the middle of nowhere with no guidance and no rules. As far as the joint jurisdictional area goes, that's why we've got to look at adopting a plan that looks more like what's it gonna look like 20 years from now? Because what I don't like the idea of, on the flip side of this, is telling people who have owned land all their lives in the southern end of the joint jurisdictional area, you're not allowed to do anything until 75 years from now. That's not fair to them as landowners when they have a highly marketable plan right now. So instead of icing people out of being able to, want to improve their land to the highest and best use, let's create a whole set of rules that in this instance, as far as joint jurisdictional goes, that is consistent with the city of Sioux Falls moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I, not for speaking for the rest of the planning commissioners, but I think most of them would agree, it would make our job a lot easier, when we get these requests then, if we had those things in place, because I think it would slow the request down, and the requests we get would be more serious and
Before we get too far, but Toby, if I'm not mistaken, we do provide for developments that are adjacent to a growth area of a city, that all of them have to conform with what the city has for streets and widths and all of those proposed. Those are all there. And Eric, when you talk about rural developments, I think that if we take a look at Lennox, or we take a look at, Lennox is a good example. They have about 180 some houses that are going to be annexed into the city, but they're right there. I wouldn't ever want to see a development coming into our county that isn't adjacent to a municipality. Like, you wouldn't want to put one, just in the middle of ag country. That would be unthinkable. But some of the things that we do have in place are constructed so that when the city annexes them, and then when they annex, they have to provide sewer and water and law enforcement, police protection and fire protection for all of those areas. So we have some safeguards. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying we shouldn't review it. I like your comments, because that's what we're here for. But we do have some things in place.
Toby, does the county to the north of us, do they allow rural residential developments?
Well, I mean, it's a district in their zoning, but they don't, in my understanding, I don't think they've rezoned a rural residential in years. No, they don't approve it. No. I mean, our comprehensive plan says that development is supposed to be guided towards the municipalities. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we have in Lincoln County is that our municipalities have really, which I'll get to in a little bit, is huge growth areas, and so really the challenge being is that, where do we say this development should be? Should it be out in, character being rural area, or should it be closer to the municipalities? And I think, this debate, we could go on for hours with that dialogue, but really what I'm saying as staff is, I think the public is communicating to us that, and it just happened, last week with the joint jurisdictional meeting, is they're saying, hey, we don't want this growth hopping out here. We don't want this growth around us. Let the cities grow out, but we don't want this just jumping out here. And so, I'm not a policymaker. I don't know the right or the wrong to that, but I think that it's important that we engage the public, that we take this dialogue that we're having amongst the board to the public as well, and say, what is it that you want? I'll go back to the building eligibility thing. I think we have a real issue there that we need to look at. That, the other parts of it, the rezones for rural residential, I mean, that's a policy thing that's going to take a lot of dialogue, and that's kind of on an individual basis. But this building eligibility, we've got a lot of issues with, these, like Eric more eloquently said it, about the issues that we have with it, that I think we need to at least have the dialogue and have public input on that as far as where we move forward with it. And like all policies, I mean, we adopted this in 1995. It's good to revisit it to say, is this what we need in Lincoln County? And not now, but everything that we do and everything that you do is about the future. It's not about today. It's about how this is going to impact us in the future and impact future boards and future residents. And it also is, the biggest thing that I hear every day in the office is, developers or realtors or whatever saying, not so much about, like, does this property have a building eligibility? They're starting to question. It's like, when is the county going to widen 106? When is the county going to widen Cliff? And when is the county going to get, sanitary sewer out to these developments? And I'm like, well, that's not our role. We're a small service provider. That's not what we do. And then when I meet with the rural waters, they're talking about, well, we're jumping up here and jumping over there. And the burden of that is on the rural users, right? The guy that's been a rural water user for years, all of a sudden he or she or everybody's paying for the growth associated with it. And so that's impacting our agricultural community as well too, is, farm, pivots and things like that. They're all really being impacted by growth and development as well. But and I'll just jump a little bit more into these, but the next item would be is amendments to the home occupation agricultural tourism regulations. So this year, the 2 conditional use permits that was denied by the Planning Commission was what I'll call agricultural type events, activities, and things like that. And so a lot of people in the rural area are looking for is how do we engage? There is a huge demand for people to come out as far as tourism activities to farms, farm tour visits and day activities and overnight activities and those different types of things. And our zoning really hasn't caught up to that type of demand or that type of a use. And so we need to take a look at how do we fit those into our regulations, but also protect the surrounding property owners. Really what you're saying with farm tourism and activities is a commercial activity. So we're not going to rezone it, but it has the same impacts as a commercial activity. It has traffic and it has noise and it has different activities and things like that. So we need to take a look at that. Sign regulations. So I'll start at the beginning of this is you didn't see a lot of proposals for ordinance amendments this year from staff for one main reason, and that is that the county's in the process of codifying all of their ordinances. And so the county Board of Commissioners hired a company that is taking all of our ordinances and putting them into a format that we'll be able to put on the website. One of the most interesting things when I first started here is I couldn't find the ordinances to begin with, and the different ordinances that we had as a county, and so we then created a web, put it on the website, but there's really no central place for what are the laws and rules and policies of the county. And so the Board of Commissioners, they, thankfully, contract with the company that's going to put that all in one place. But what you're going to see is instead of Chapter 10 and Chapter 9 and Chapter 20, everything is going to get reformatted as far as different numbering and things like that. And so it'll just be a learning curve that we'll have to go through. But for the public, it'll be very transparent that they'll be able to see what the rules and regulations and policies are. And so in saying that is that as we were paying for that, we decided not to really pursue any new amendments at the time because then those would be added to the cost to codify them. But in saying that, we'll have that done probably within a few months, and we'll be able to move forward with some of these. But one of those things is the sign regulations. And so signs as far as planning and zoning is a big issue because sign regulations more than any other thing has gone to the Supreme Court and as far as what's legal and what's not legal with signage regulations. And so there are components of our current sign regulations that need to be updated to reflect some of those Supreme Court decisions, primarily political signage and those different types of things. And so legal counsel and myself are working on kind of a proposal how we would proceed with that, but that'll be something that we need to work on for next year. The next part of that is that this year we finally did adopt formally the Lincoln County Master Drainage Plan. And the Lincoln County Master Drainage Plan, it was really a bottoms-up type plan. We went to the public and we said, what are some concerns and issues we had? We didn't really have any policies or any goals in place until we met with the public, and a lot of things that came out of there is that yes, there is concerns with drainage, and we do want it to be regulated. And so, that's, as a bureaucracy, that's probably the number one thing is we want to make sure that this is a concern, but also that the public wants it to be regulated. And so in Lincoln County, we do not have per se a drainage permit. We do have to enforce state law, which is basically the time and concentration has to be match pre-development rates as post-development rates. And so we primarily do that through our subdivision ordinance. And so in our current subdivision ordinance, we do have drainage regulations as far as how we determine post or pre-development, post-development rates. But one of the things that, as we've been working with our drainage engineer as staff, that we've identified is that we don't have a succinct detention policy. So when we have a distinct, like, so that when I work with a development to say, well, this is the requirement that you have to have for detention on your site. And so a consistent kind of approach to that type of a thing. And so we've been working on that with the drainage engineer. So I think that'll be the first thing you'll probably see within the next couple of months, is that we'll be bringing forward an amendment to the subdivision ordinance. But in addition to that, this year, as you've seen, we've had more rezonings than we've had in previous years. And so we've also had more preliminary plans. And so one of the most frustrating things, I think, as staff is the preliminary plan process, because it doesn't give us everything that we need. When I stand before both of your bodies, is you'll say, well, what about the drainage? And the public says, what about the drainage? Well, that's not required at a preliminary plan stage. What's required for drainage at a preliminary plan stage is basically, where does the water flow currently? Not how much is it, and not how much needs to be retained, it's where does it flow now? And so what I would like to see, and it'd be a dialogue that we'll have to talk about, is moving all of those requirements up to the preliminary plan stage. So detention, rate of flow, rate of concentration, all of that would be brought up. Now, the challenge to that is that we're asking a lot of the developer, because they're gonna have to engage their engineer, and they're gonna have to pay for their engineer to tell us exactly what those things are. And they'll have to do on-site investigation, surveying, and those different types of things. And that's not a guarantee, because if they don't get the rezone approved, then they're out that process and that review. But as we look at what's been happening with development trends, is we're getting a lot of those questions that we can't answer. And it's not to say that those questions don't get answered now, because under our current ordinance, they have to submit final development plans. Those final development plans are reviewed by myself and our consultants, and then they're approved, but that's not in the public process. They don't see that. But it does meet all of the county standards, policies, and ordinance and laws in place. It's just not part of that early process in the decision-making process. And I personally, as staff, I think it should be, because I think that's an important consideration, especially with the drainage concerns that we have from the residents. So with that, I guess, is there any comments or questions on that, or thoughts?
Toby, that's the number one comment I get from people, especially because of the nature of my district, is drainage concerns. I hear from a lot of people in Spring Creek about it when we wanted to put developments up there. And I watched the last planning and zoning meeting, and I think I sat here and watched a proposed development that probably wasn't ready for prime time and should have been, pushed back, and it was. But the consideration was based upon drainage. And the problem was there was no data or study for anyone to consider beforehand. It was just kind of this generalized belief that the drainage is a problem out there, so we're not gonna approve it. Well, when policymakers make decisions, they should probably do it based upon really good data, engineering, the science, as well as what our values are. And we've got to speed that process up, because, and maybe in some other counties, this is not a big concern, but in Lincoln County, drainage is a huge concern, especially for development in rural areas. And given the fact that it is such an omnipresent concern, we've got to speed that process up so that policymakers, sitting in front of planning and zoning here, but also on county commission, have that data ahead of time so they can make a better informed decision than just going off their gut. And so that's something I think we really need to see going into the future.
So I'll answer that and kind of add to it, is the problem is going to be, though, is that jurisdiction-wise. So your drainage regulations are part of your subdivision ordinance, which is your subdivision of land. Now, our top northern communities, they've all exercised their maximum amount of jurisdiction. And so what you see here, all of these pink areas and all of this area here, Lincoln County has no jurisdiction over drainage, because that's governed by their regulations. So no matter how good we do with what we do, all of this is still going to be governed by them and their regulations and their processes. And so that's a challenge that I'll get to in the kind of the bottom there. But I still believe in what I've told our drainage consultant is, I think regardless of our jurisdiction, we need to be the forefront of what good drainage development is in Lincoln County.
Yeah.
Though. So hopefully that our municipalities look at ours and say, well, that's something that we should be similar to or not. Now, the next part of this, I've always said, we don't have a drainage permit. And realistically, we do, because when we issue building permits, is we do make sure that it's accountable to state statute. But the one issue when I say a drainage permit, when I say that is, I think staff would want a drainage permit for these areas. So that when these are governed by their subdivision regulations and we don't have any jurisdiction over it, but we know what good drainage is if we have good drainage policy, we would piggyback their developments. It's our building permits, it's our zoning, and would require them to get a drainage permit through us for those areas.
Well, and we get rezoning requests for those parcels that fall into someone else's jurisdiction. And it is, I don't have numbers, but it is often where we are denying rezoning requests based upon drainage issues. And so that individual never gets an opportunity to have the rezone go forward to be evaluated under the drainage rules regarding the subdivision, because they can't even make it through the first gate, which is the rezoning portion. And that's why I think, given the fact that we're in a multi-jurisdictional area, these people can't even get off the ground. And it's sometimes, not always, it's being denied for what are considered drainage concerns.
And what we've experienced in that area too, is it goes both ways. We've approved rezonings that the cities now aren't approving development plans.
Correct.
So it's not just that way. It's both.
So we got to find a way to align that process so we can weed out bad plans and or help improve them and or approve good plans for that landowners and builders have as well. Because we're not doing anything, we're not being fair to either party then if we don't come to the table with all the data right away to make a decision.
But it gets back to the development patterns though too, is that when we're approving a building eligibility on a 40, the drainage impacts are not there. But when we're approving a 25, a 30 lot development, we know the drainage impacts are there.
Correct.
And we've seen it too, so.
Toby, when I drive around, we talk about drainage, and I drive around the county and talk to neighbors, and for myself, where I live on farm, tiling is becoming more and more and more prevalent. And this isn't tiling so you drain a low spot. You grid the farm. So where, the water has to go somewhere. And when you start shifting water from one to another, the thing that we don't have, to me, a plan or an idea. I mean, you go into Iowa, or you go to Minnesota, where they've dug a trench, of 10 to 12 feet deep, and then they follow a line, and everybody drains into it, so there's nobody. But we're affecting neighbors, and a neighbor is supposed to be contacted by somebody that intends to drain, but we can't drain them into ditches, and I think we got a spaghetti bowl right now. Well, we really don't have a very clear, concise plan on tiling, that really does that. Or I could be mistaken, but I don't know of any. Do we have one?
Well, there's no silver bullet.
Yeah.
I mean, there never will be, But what I say is that you've got a lot of factors and really what we're talking about is stormwater runoff. Mm-hmm. So last summer, we didn't have that many calls, right?
No.
On a good year, we have a lot of calls, though, on a good rain year and things like that. But what I would say, though, is that what I try to say, and that's of no, solace to anybody, is that I think we do a good job of making sure that development is out of the flood area. Meaning we make sure that when we build a house, when we build a business, it's not going to flood. Now, do we have water on people's property? Yes. Does it get close to people's structures? Yes. But knock on wood, we don't have those instances where it's there yet. Or more importantly, the infrastructure part of it. We're really in that north end, some of those existing developments up there, we're pushing the limits of infrastructure up there, running over, running out roads, running out culverts and things like that. Those need retrofit, which I'll get to, is what we need to also talk about. But I think what we need to, this is an incremental thing. There is no way that you're absolutely, and what I would tell you, this simple thing of saying we're going to make developers do all of this up front with this, they're not going to be happy with that, because it's going to cost them a significant amount of money at a risk that they're going to get the change of zone. But it's something that we need to have a dialogue and talk about. And ultimately, it's up to you guys to say, yes, this is where we need to go with it. But as staff, we can tell you what we think is what we're experiencing and what the impacts of what these changes will be. But I want to keep moving quick here to get through the rest of this. But the next one is really to take a look at our conditional use permitting process and to see if there's uses that we can move around. And the prime one I'll give you is oversized accessory buildings. So in Lincoln County, if you're in a subdivision of 4 or more lots, if you're building a shed that's over 1,500 square feet, we require you to get a conditional use permit. If it's in the joint jurisdictional area, it's over 1,200 square feet. We do a significant amount of those a year. And what I get concerned about is really when it comes to planning and zoning, it's being consistent. And so, if Joe comes in and he wants to build a 1,500 square foot, but the neighbors say, well, I want him to have some trees and I want it to be, match the siding and all that stuff. But then Mary comes in and we say, well, but she doesn't have to have trees and she doesn't have to have signage. That's not being consistent with the conditional use permit. And so one thought we have is move some of those to permitted specials and just create the standards that we want and make it consistent. Because one thing that we're seeing is, the main trend we're seeing is that people want to live out in the rural area. That's number one. Number 2 trend is when they move out in the rural area, they want to have storage. They want to have a big building. Yep. And so what was in the past, a 1,200 or a 1,500, now you guys know this, we're seeing 5,000-6,000 square foot garages, and so that is a concern of the neighbors. That's a concern of everybody. And so it's something that we need to have a dialogue about. And all of these things are, again, like I've said, it's not with, I'll repeat it again, is we're not the policymaker, we're just staff, but we see things out there and we listen to the public and we hear the public's concern, and it needs to be a part of our process is to continually look to say, is this the right policy? Can these be modified or not?
So if we change that to a permitted process, we can just set the square footage and that's just what it is, and it can't go over
That's
that.
one option, or move it to a permitted special use.
Or
if they meet
permitted
the
special
standard-
use, so you could, okay,
Yeah, so if they meet the standards, then it's there.
I see.
And I won't get really in depth into this, but I'm beginning to think it really should be based on the square footage of the main level,
Of the what?
on the main level of the house, Like if we've got a 2,000 square foot house and they're coming in on an 8,000 square foot accessory building, I mean, that's something that I understand the neighbors' concerns on.
Yeah, and the size of the lot maybe
Correct.
too.
Yeah.
Make it a percentage of the,
Correct.
yeah.
But again, that needs to be discussed and public comment and everything. It's just something that we've been seeing. And then the other part of this is a zoning map update. And so one of the things that we've talked about is, and actually in Lincoln County, we have a fabulous, what I'll call interactive map. It's way better than Sioux Falls and way better than Minnehaha County. It's one of the best I think we have because it's easily accessible. It's easy to work through and those different types of things. You can see the zoning, you can see all that stuff. That we update that continuously. The minute that a rezone's done or the minute that something parcel transfers or changes ownership and things like that, we update all the time. So one of the thoughts that we've had is to make that our interactive map really our official zoning map, so that it's more reflective of what currently is happening now. So that's one thing we'll go through, and then just annual miscellaneous ordinance updates. There's little things like like typos and different policies and changes that are non-controversial that just need to be updated that we need to bring forward. And then plans and special projects. So one of the things that we've talked about in the past is our comprehensive plan is a 2025 comprehensive plan. So we need to go through an update process of that. And so the Planning Commission and myself will kind of work through a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners about how we want to proceed with kind of updating that in the process for that. The other one is application review fees. So what I showed you at the beginning of the meeting, and I should have jumped in, and I know Joel's going to remind me about this tomorrow, but so in Lincoln County, we require a building permit for essentially structural changes. And so we don't require a building permit for roofing, siding, windows, and those different types of things. And we get, and we have a lot of properties transfers or realtors call us, I know it always becomes an issue at the assessment hearings and things like that, is when was the roof replaced and those different types of things. I would tell you that I think we're getting to the point where it really needs to be considered. The Board of Commissioners has always not required that. They've always exempted those things. But I think we're seeing a lot of different things that probably raise the concern that should be added. But I haven't taken a look at how that's going to impact us. I have a gut feeling. I think it would double the amount of permits that we actually have based on the number of calls that we get where we say, nope, that's not required. I think it would be a significant thing. And then you throw in, if you ever have a hailstorm, I mean, the city of Sioux Falls, the most building permits they ever issued was in 2014. That's when everybody replaced their roofs, So it's a significant thing. But I think we're to a point where we need to take a look at those different types of things. Then the second part of that is that, I've got 2 building inspectors right now, but the other part that we should look at too is we don't do electrical, plumbing, or mechanical inspections. So the electrical and plumbing, we defer that to the state of South Dakota. They handle those. Based on information that we're hearing is that there's a backlog there, and it takes them time to get that done, which also holds us back on occupancies and issuing those different types of things. So those are some things we need to take a look at. But I'll jump back into this. But in general, we want to take a look at the application review fees. I never want to be one that says, oh, well, we need to increase fees and all these other things. There has to be a reason for that. But really what we're seeing is that the amount of time and review and public hearings and publications and everything, that we need to make sure that's covering it. Because those are services that are above and beyond a typical taxpayer. Those are development type services that are being provided. The other thing that want to do is work with the municipalities to determine their growth area boundaries. So as Commissioner Schmidt said, all of these areas are essentially areas where you could rezone to rural residential, you could rezone to commercial or industrial. But the communities are growing, they're extending some of these areas out that are beyond their future 20, 30, 40-year plans. They're saying 60 years out and different types of things like that. And so we need to make sure that we, are these appropriate growth areas, or could they be more reasonable, or is there ways we could take a look at, or areas where they don't think they're going to grow into, and those types of issues. And then the other issue would be is to look at additional land use tools to preserve, enhance some of these rural landscape things. I know that everyone, talks about growth and those different types of things, but our current comprehensive plan really talks about preservation of agriculture as the primary land use thing. And that's not just a policy thing. I think when you look at that as a whole, it has a lot of impact to different types of things. If we're truly going to allow development and growth, I mean, we have to look at the cost of and the impacts to the county. Law enforcement, emergency management, our rural water providers, our road networks, and all those different types of things. I mean, if we allow, other than what the comprehensive plan allows, is that we have to address some of those things and concerns, and especially the township roads. I mean, we're getting more, we're becoming first name basis with a lot of our townships as staff just because of the issues that we have out there. So, and then one of the things I always throw in there is that, of course, we're fortunate or blessed enough to have some state parks in the county. And so one of the things that whenever I meet with those officials, they always talk about trails and networking and wanting to do some connections and different types of things like that. And then always when we work with our cities, they always talk about, plans to extend trails or parks or those different types of things. And in general, is that as we continue to develop or urbanize our agricultural lands, is there a need to preserve some of those lands for parks and for, recreational activities? And so one of the things that we could take a look at is doing a master plan on that. And more so, not that we would develop those things, but that we would look at preserving lands for those types of things. So it's always a good thing to make sure that, is there lands that we should be protecting and preserving? And then the last thing is really a capital improvements program. So the floodplain administrator and myself have been working with our drainage engineer to develop a CIP plan for drainage in the county. And so over the years, we've always heard about different types of areas that have issues. And so one of the things that we're taking a look at is if if the county wanted to pursue some of those, what I call issues, is what would be the steps in the process for that. And, you know, of course, there's a cost associated with that, but how would we pursue that in a way that would be cost effective for the landowner and the county in that? So probably what you'll see is some dialogue from staff next year about kind of how that would look as far as a capital improvement plan to what I'll call kind of correct some of the things or issues that potentially might be out there. And then the last thing is really, which is a goal of ours all the time, is that we like having public participation in the planning process. You know, when the public comes to the meetings, that's when we hear more things. But we need to be more proactive with some of those things. It's always hard when the neighbors come in and we're like, well, this is the rule and this is what the board has to do or what they need to do, as opposed to maybe more starting from the bottom up and saying, you know, okay, these are some concerns or issues and what can we do about them? And one of the things that we've thought of is maybe, you know, just going out to them. You know, we've learned that through the redistricting process with the commission and some other processes, especially the master drainage plan, is that we go out to people and kind of engage them. And so one of the things that we've talked about is maybe doing a coffee with the planners so that we would piggyback on different types of activities and just bring a bucket of coffee and just have a table available to talk about, well, this is what we do. This is zoning. This is how it works, and those different types of things. So planning doesn't work unless the community supports it. I mean, all the things, all the plans and policies we do and all the rules and regulations we pass, if it's not supported by the public, then none of this is going to work. And the goal of all of this is not to make people happy today. It's to look at the future and say, this is what we anticipate today is what we need to do, because nobody wants to screw this up. I mean, you know, once we develop or once we do something bad, and we know that today. I mean, we all can name the places that we would look at today and go, well, you know, maybe we wouldn't do that again, you know. And so it's important that we kind of continually engage the public and go through that process. I know that's difficult to get there, but. So this is kind of some initiatives. Certainly, you know, we're always open to additional things that we could take a look at or go through and stuff like that. But I think this is a pretty good laundry list. And as when we were talking about this today, staff looked at me and said, well, who's going to do all this? You know, I mean, it's, you know, we're down we're a little thin right now as far as staffing and that. But you know, I think unless you have goals and unless you put it in paper, I don't think we're going to work towards these things. But I definitely think these things aren't staff driven. I think these things are really things that we hear from the public on a monthly basis. And it's something that if we don't get ahead of this now, because we all know it, we don't do anything tomorrow. I mean, it takes a while to get all this stuff done. But if we don't start talking about this today, we're never going to get to tomorrow with some of these things. And so, but okay. Last thing real quick that I got is, over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of citizens that have approached the Board of Commissioners or approached the Planning Commission and said, you know, I'd really like to change this policy. A lot of it dealing with, I'll say, is the odor footprint and some of those different types of things. And how it worked in the past is that that we would have them go to the Board of Commissioners, and then the Board of Commissioners would recommend the topic back to the Planning Commission. But there was never really like, what does this look like, and what do they really want, and how does this process going to work? And so then staff kind of got drug into this. We're developing what the language should be and how it should work and all those different types of things. And then we would get it up to the point, and then the people that we were working with would say, well, we don't really support that, or that wasn't the wording that we wanted, you know. And so, you know, it was really a sort of something that I really wanted to work on. And so, like of everything, the answer was right in front of us. So in the zoning ordinance, there's a provision in there for initiating a text amendment. We've just never implemented the application process for that. And mainly because I think the commission, the Board of Commissioners had this informal process that they continue to work with. But in dealing with this, I think this is the better approach. It's already essentially, I just created the application. It's the same thing as a map amendment, which is a rezone. This would just be a text amendment. They would submit the same fee that they did for a map amendment. It's $350. And so, but they would present it, and then they would come in and present it to the Board of Commissioners, or to the Planning Commission of the Board of Commissioners, and it would really be a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And staff's role in the process would be is we would just really show you what the change would do. And so, and this could go both ways. I mean, people could propose something that's not advantageous or is advantageous. But ultimately, it kind of gets us moving past go from where we're at now. Because if we didn't get the 3 votes to move it down to the planning commission, it just died. And so at that time, I don't think, the person didn't have a chance to really kind of generate what the idea was, present what the idea was. And then it was like, opposition and things like that. And so it really just didn't surface, I guess. And so this, I guess, it's already governed for me to develop this application. I guess what I'm just asking is this okay, thumbs up, and we'll put this on the website and start rolling with it as soon as possible. So,
Is it just those 3 things, Toby?
yep, yeah,
Okay.
that they signed, yep.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, it was already governed for us to develop this application. We'll just put it on there and we'll start rolling with it. And I think, in my honest opinion, I think it's just more transparency. It just allows who's proposing this, why are they proposing it, and what does it do, and so,
And it allows them or forces them to be the ones that do the wording instead of you trying to have to read their mind on what you think they want.
yep, yeah, yep, so. Okay, we'll get rolling on that. With that, that's all I really had. I didn't think it'd take us an hour and a half to get to that point, but I appreciate everyone's attendance, and I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Toby. I really appreciate all the work you put into this, the planning.
Could you email us, Toby, that list of items that we were going through at the end? Could you send that on email?
Yep.
Thanks.
Did you tell your dad?
Yeah, I will.
You
Absolutely.
want to see him?
Well.
Yeah, let's put on next.
he
We'll
moved
put on
to
next month's
Missouri
planning
now.
commission agenda. Yep.
And,
You remind me.
I have a.
All right, we are now going to move into the planning commission portion of our meeting. We have all seen the meeting minutes, and make a motion to accept meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I had one amendment to the minutes on item 3. I was actually a no vote on that,
Oh, okay.
for the record.
Thank you very much. Good job. All right, we ask for a motion with the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve with the amendment to it.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will do roll call. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jerry's Jungling is also a yes. All right, approval of the meeting agenda. Is there any changes, Mr. Brown?
No change, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ask for a motion and a second with the meeting agenda.
I'll make a motion, Scott, to approve.
Second?
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will do roll call. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. All right, at this time, I will ask the public to come forward if they want to speak with us about any items that are not on the agenda tonight. So any concerns or anything you want us to know about, feel free to step up. All right, seeing none, we will move on to old business.
None, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And then public hearing, Mr. Brown, I believe the floor is yours.
So the first item is an application. This is an application to rezone from Julie Palmer on behalf of her father, Keith Palmer. And location is approximately 1,900 feet east of the city of Worthing. I'll get that pulled up there. And so parcel size is approximately 10.52 acres in size. Purpose of this, the applicant did not submit a concept plan with the application, but in discussions with the applicant identified that they would be selling the property for commercial uses. So property is currently zoned RR rural residential. The applicant is proposing to change this parcel to C commercial. And again, no concept plan was submitted with that application. Staff report or staff analysis, the staff reviewed the City of Worthing's comprehensive plan. Of course, this property is in an urban expansion area under the county's comprehensive plan. The City of Worthing's comprehensive plan identifies this area as a nodal commercial with a business buffer on it. Staff interpretation or finding is that this application is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Because again, it's identified in the Worthing Comprehensive Plan as a future nodal commercial or commercial and business area. Staff did post property. Staff did also work with the applicant to notify within 500 feet of the property. To date, I don't think we've heard any comments from adjoining landowners. Staff did have a interdepartmental meeting this morning on the application. And I don't believe that Worthing had any comments on the application other than staff's comments on that. So again, staff does find that this application is consistent with the comprehensive plan. With that, I'm happy to answer questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff tonight? So we did reach out to the City of Worthing, and they had no comments one way or another.
So the conversations I had with the applicant is that she was in direct communication with city staff on this, and they didn't have any objections to that. That was through her. We did have an interdepartmental meeting today that we did invite staff to, and there was no comments from them. So,
Okay.
okay.
I do have an email where they said they are okay with it.
Okay, okay, what we'll do first is we'll get through some of this, and then I'll ask input for and against the application, and we can talk through that then. Unless you're the owner.
I'm the daughter of the owner
Okay, you get to come up earlier than everyone else then.
and his realtor.
All right, commissioners, any questions for staff on this application? Seeing none, at this time, I'll ask the applicant to come forward and discuss tell us a little bit about your application, please.
Well, it's
Oh,
zoned.
Excuse me. Yeah, I should have read this earlier, but anyone that comes up, please give your name and address clearly so we can have it on the record.
Julie Palmer, and I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Do you want my home address?
Yes, please.
3211 West Bitterroot Street, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Thank you, Julie.
Yep. So I am the daughter of the owner. I'm also a real estate agent. I listed the land for sale, and most of the people wanting to buy it wanted to do a business or a house or something. There's a railroad behind it. I had gone to 6 Worthing city meetings, and they wanted me to put $1 million sewer infrastructure in, but could not tell me when we would get sewer hookup. And nobody in between the land and the town has sewer. So they're asking me to put in fancy roads that Worthing itself does not, in some places, have. So it just didn't make financial sense that we would put in, $1 million sewer and then still have to have septic. Who's going to buy a 1 acre lot at that price in Worthing? So, and I listed it for sale, and everybody wanted to do a business. And so I have an email from Jason from Worthing Planning and Zoning, and he said he was okay if somebody bought it commercial and just wanted to do septic, and they were okay with that.
Okay.
So, do you want to see that email or?
Mr. Brown, do you want a copy of that?
Okay.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions for Julie?
Julie, when you said that you had people wanting to do businesses on there, have they alluded to what sort of business?
We had someone interested in doing storage facility, and someone else wanted to do a house, and somebody wanted to do an event barn.
So have you visited with the neighbors to the west about this at all, or has anybody talked to you about
I
the?
sent out certified letters to notify everybody,
Yep,
and
nobody talked to you?
no, and I
Okay.
included my business card in some of it, so if they had questions, but nope, nothing.
What, where's the access to this property right now?
Well, First Street that goes through Worthing is paved, and to the north of the property, and then there's gravel road to the east.
Right, but, off the highway, is there an approach?
Not currently.
Okay,
So my plan is to list it for sale, and then whoever buys it will have to come to you with plans and decide what they want to do, but the person that wanted to do the event barn is still inquiring about it and knows that I'm rezoning, so. And they, I guess, were in touch with Jason from Worthing and I think Toby. And they were told that they should have an approach at the gravel road. So, and they were okay with that.
This is a 10.5 acre site, correct? All right, commissioners, any other questions of Julie? See you, none. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will ask for anyone that would like to come forward and speak in support of the application. What's that?
he asked if you had questions, that'll be next.
Okay. Yep, there'll be one for support for, and then the next one will go against. Okay.
Standard questions.
Yeah, just,
Question, I don't have a support or against, I just have a general question, so I have to wait.
come on up.
Thanks. Derek Sitter, 47279 280th Street, one of the properties in the yellow box. My question is, what kind of businesses can go into a commercial C type zoning, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mr. Brown, could you help us with that one?
Well, there's a number of uses that are allowed as permitted, permissive, and conditional in that district. What I would say is they're generally retail-oriented type activities. But we do allow car repair, some of those different types of things. So I think what's of note is no concept plan was submitted with the application. So for us to speculate what could be, I would say that it could be any of those uses that would be allowed in a commercial district.
And one thing to remember is this is just a vote to rezone. Anything that would get built there, they would have to get permitted as well. So there would be a comment period on whatever the business is gonna be that purchases that. So just because it gets rezoned doesn't mean that we'll necessarily approve or that, that the business that applies for the conditional use permit would get approved.
Does the rezoning just affect the 10.5 acres, but because we're within 500 feet of that land, how does that affect our property value? Do we stay part of the residential?
Right, it would just affect that property, that 10.5 acres. Yours will stay residential yet, or ag or whatever is listed right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think we'll stick with support. Is there anyone else in the audience that would come up and support the application? Okay, seeing none, I will ask anybody in opposition of the application to come forward and speak.
Hal Schroeder, 47283 280th Street. I'm literally right next door to it. I obviously don't want a commercial site next to my house. it seems very open-ended as far as what can go there. And I get there's some interest, but that doesn't say that I don't have a mechanic shop right next to me or even an event center. I mean, you know, I know wedding dances, so I don't really want a wedding dance going on till 11 o'clock at night right next door. You know, we're in a resident, or not residential, but there's a bunch of houses around there, and I mean, there's plenty of places people can put up buildings closer to Worthing, so I just strongly oppose it being right next door to me, so that's all I got.
Thank you, Hal. All right, I will ask anybody else in opposition to the application come forward and speak. Okay, noted. You're against.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, if that's all the public input, I will close the floor, and I'll ask a motion from the commission so we can discuss further.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Toby, one last question. Does this property have a building eligibility on it as residential, as it sits currently?
So that's, my understanding, that's why it was rezoned to rural residential, so it obtained a building eligibility. Because rural residential, they can build as many as you can fit within an acre on the property.
Oh, gotcha, okay, yeah.
So it was rezoned by the county to rural residential.
I understand. So they can build houses on this thing?
Correct.
Got it.
Which was the intent of when it was originally rezoned, because this was agricultural to begin with, and it was rezoned to rural residential because the applicant stated that they wanted to build residences on the property.
And when was that?
I think I mentioned the staff report of it. I'm gonna get it correct on this. 1996
Okay.
was when it was rezoned, yeah.
Just a second. Hal, just a quick question for you. When was your house built?
Probably about that same time.
Okay. Okay. That's all, Commissioner, or Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. I think, Julie, what we'll do is we'll ask for a motion and then discussion, and if there's any questions of you or of us to you, then we'll bring them up then. We've already done public input in the application. But if someone in commission would like to ask you forward, definitely could work it that way. So I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I will move to accept, or, I'm sorry, move to go forward with the rezone.
From residential to commercial.
From rural residential to commercial.
Okay.
I'll second. For
All right, we have a
discussion.
motion, a second, and then we can have a group discussion.
Can we please hear what Julie has to say? Could you come back up here, please?
Just a minute, should we vote on the motion first?
So
We're doing discussion now.
Doing discussion
Before
first,
we
yeah.
vote on the motion.
So I'm Julie Palmer, and as I stated, I initially wanted to develop it and do lots and be able to build homes on it. I'm a real estate agent. We'd get tax revenue, build homes, sell the lots. And the city of Worthing's engineer told me I'd have to put in $1 million in just the sewer and roads, which I'm guessing they have septic. Why? And a lady at the meeting said, I wish I had the kind of roads you want her to put in, and I live in town and I have dirt roads. So financially, who's gonna buy a 1 acre lot in Worthing, South Dakota with fancy roads and $1 million sewer system and then have to put in septic because the town is telling me there's no way that they can give me a date when we would get sewer hooked up. And then they would have to, wouldn't they? In order to hook the city up to my sewer, they would have to pay. So then they have to get rid of their septic and do as well. Yeah, Well, no, you won't get septic. You'd have to put in sewer. Well, so I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place where, and they did this to my dad. He wanted to do that and build, but how do you financially, and I've talked to lawyers and they're like, you could pay a lawyer because that's wrong. If they are not going to provide a service, but they're charging me $1 million to put in amenities that we're never going to have in my lifetime, how does that financially work? Would you do that? Would you spend that kind of money? And then what would you charge for a 1 acre lot there? Nobody in Worthing's going to pay that kind of money. I would not get a return. So if I can't build houses and have just septic, and I can't do commercial because they don't want commercial. There's 3 homes, by the way, between town and the yellow, because my dad sold those lots initially, sold them to them. So for discounted price, and they got 3 1 acre lots. So there's only 3 homes. So what can I do? You know, I mean, it doesn't financially make sense. Somebody has to say, okay, we're not going to let you do commercial. We're going to let you do lots and develop it. And we're not going to expect you to have fancier roads than Worthing has or fancier sewer than the neighbors have.
Yeah, well, we understand.
So that's where I'm at. I'm like, okay, so I feel like nobody's letting me do anything there. So what my poor dad is, you know, he's in hospice and this is bugging him. He's like, they pretty much screw me over. That's wrong. And I mean, I guess if I have to get a lawyer, then I will. I really don't want to spend $40,000 on a lawyer to have someone tell me what I can and can't do with this that makes financial sense. Do you see my point?
I got just a couple questions while I'm thinking
Okay.
this, okay? Was this zoned rural residential and then your dad sold these 3 lots that were there? So that was rural residential when those were sold?
Yep.
Okay. I guess I'm confused, Toby, Julie.
At least
Just a
that's
second,
what my dad
just a
told
second.
me, so I don't.
So
Julie, thank you. I
It-
appreciate it.
she's talking about Worthing and wanting her to build these roads, but does she really have to?
It's under the jurisdictional Worthing Subdivision Authority. They can require her to make
They
those
can.
improvements. Yep, they have
Okay.
jurisdictional Worthing. Yep, it's not our jurisdiction to say yes or no.
Got it.
In the letter that you got, does it specify you can use septic if it's commercial only?
Right, the email that I gave Toby just now, Jason, but that's the problem. The city of Worthing was amiable to me developing it and having just septic. But then then it got to the commission and there was a gentleman who nixed it all and said I had to have the sewer system and nice fancy paved roads and curb and gutter. And I'm like, wow, you know, I mean, I don't know if you've driven through Worthing, but they have dirt roads in some parts of town. So a lady who was taking notes said, why are you expecting so much more of her? And she's not even in the city limits. And I don't have those kind of roads and I'm in town. So you know, it's like they're impeding me from making any progress here.
And Julie, was this the Worthing Planning and Zoning? Or who, City Commission, or who was it?
Well, Worthing, everybody was in favor of a development, of building houses, having lots and having residential. But then the last meeting I went to, they told me I had to have in certain
and
roads.
who's they?
Is it
The
city or
commission.
the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yeah, the commission.
The City
So
Commission.
Jason originally was okay
And
with
who's
just septic.
Jason?
Jason Schroeder is planning and zoning from Worthing. But then I went to a meeting and there was a commissioner that was there and he nixed it all and said I had to call the city engineer and he told me it would cost $1 million to have the roads and the sewer put in. And I'm just like, how do you financially make that work?
Mr. Brown, if it's zoned rural residential, how come she can't? I'm not following the,
She can do it, but she has to put in infrastructure in order to put the
per
development.
the city of,
Per the city.
which
Be-
I
Because they
understand
want
you're
to
saying
save
that,
the
but-
money in the future. They want the tax revenue, but they want me to front the bill. so that they don't have to put in that system. But when I asked them, what time frame are we looking at for having sewer hooked up? Well, we have no idea. That'll be way down the road. Well, my dad spent his lifetime trying to do this, and they've stopped him at every time, and he's just sitting on it his whole life. Now he's in hospice, and it's still bugging him. The other day, he's like, just get rid of it. And I'm like, no, this is not right. And I have talked to some lawyers, and I've talked to my brokers, and they all agree. We're pretty much being kept from doing anything with it, except baling it for hay.
Right, I do think if you would, and this is just my opinion, if you'd break into 2 or 3 lots and do septic, it'd probably be all right, but again, that's not my call.
Can I please get that in writing?
It's
Because
not our jurisdiction.
that email, they say that if I do commercial, they're okay with just septic for commercial. Jason says it.
Who's this, Jason?
Jason, yep. And so I printed it out and brought it tonight because I knew that would be the issue. It's like, okay, I have it in writing, and I told him I want it in an email because I'm tired of going to all these meetings and then they tell me no,
But then I guess I'm just confused on the politics over in Worthing and how that whole process is going.
They don't
little
want
bit.
progress.
Mr. Brown, you said you had a meeting with them today. Was this brought up in that meeting, or?
They didn't participate today.
Oh, they didn't participate.
And when
Which
you
doesn't
say they,
always-
who's they?
Well, we invite cities, so Jason Schroeder, he's our zoning administrator. And then they have other individuals on the planning commission, or on the planning commission. But I'll just read this once so we get this on the record, okay? So it's from Jason Schroeder. He's the zoning administrator for the city of Worthing. He says to Julie, yes, after talking with Scott, we think rezone this land to light industrial would be a good thing. And yes, septic for this would be okay. So we're not petitioning to rezone it to light industrial, it's petitioning to rezone it to commercial. And then, so, your task before you is a land use decision. And this is the issue we talked about at 5 o'clock, and we'll continue to talk about this. We deal with this every day, is that our jurisdiction for subdivision, for requiring infrastructure, stops at these lines. We can't change that tonight. We're not going to solve that tonight. What you need to determine, is this an appropriate application for the property, for the zoning part of it. Not to say that this shouldn't be taken into consideration, but I guess my other concern would be is that, if they say we're not going to require infrastructure there, are they going to require platting and then they require infrastructure? There's a lot of things that I don't know the answers to as this, What I would say to you, as I would say to Julie, is that we require subdivisions to pave their roads, to put ditches in, to put culverts in, to do those different types of things. So infrastructure is required even in the county for a subdivision plan. But we have ordinances that require that. So I don't know how you want to handle this. You have a motion on the table before you, I guess. But as far as a lot of the questions, I don't have answers for you on kind of Worthing's position on that part of it. And quite frankly, even if I told you that, until they approve an application or not, we don't know what they're going to do with it. And so again, your sole jurisdiction is the zoning of this property, and how you want to handle that part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, we do have a motion on the table to approve. Any further discussion? And we can talk as much as we want.
This is tough. To me personally, I just don't feel like I have enough information to make a real good decision tonight. I don't really want to vote. I can't say I would vote yes or no currently based on what I know. And, I would really like to just see it get tabled personally, but that's where I'm at with it.
I agree with that too. I just don't think that we got enough information from, if we could get some notes or some correspondence with Worthing to see what, what their big hangup is for this sewage and road infrastructure and all this other reasoning behind that, so we can make a better informed decision.
Yeah, I guess personally where I sit tonight is I don't know that I could vote for a complete rezone for the rest of this property's life without having all the information in front of me.
And I do agree. I don't think it's a commercial use property right now, just because of the surrounding area. I would like to see it be residential. You know, and maybe we table it for a month, then Julie can get some more answers or something like that, and then we'll revisit it again next month. I mean, that's an option for us.
Yeah.
So do that, we'll go through the vote, and then everyone have to vote no on the approval, and then we could do,
We could table the motion.
yeah, we'll do it that way. table
We could
the
make a
motion.
motion to table the motion. Correct?
Are you doing that?
I will make a motion to table the motion. Scott?
And I'll second it. I just think we need more information. If we make a wrong decision, then it's not gonna help you in the long run. I mean, we just need to get more information from Worthing to see where they're at with it.
Yeah.
I think I would encourage you to get a lawyer on this also.
So also, yeah, just remind everyone, we're rezoning it, where it's not our job right now for the events hall, storage units or whatever, that would be
Right.
for conditional use permits
Right.
after, if it goes forward, so.
Right.
All right, we have a motion to table the motion. Any further discussion? All right, I'll do a roll call. Mr. Brown, do you agree with the procedure, what we're doing?
Yeah, whatever you want to
Okay.
do, yep.
All right, roll call on the table. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes,
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
It matters, but I'm going to vote no. All right, so it's tabled. And just, again, the reason I was going to vote no is because I just don't feel no matter what happens, it is a commercial property.
Oh,
But that's why we all take a vote?
I just didn't think you liked my procedure.
No, not at all. No. Nope, just, that was my opinion.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Brown, number 2.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, this next is an application for a conditional use permit to transfer one building eligibility from the north half of the southeast quarter to the south half of the southeast quarter. The applicant for this item is Penty Farms LLC. Property owner is Penty Farms LLC and Peterson Egg LLC. Somewhat unique to this application is that you'll notice we have 2 owners of this property, but the controlling party of Penty Farms is also a member of Peterson Egg, so he does, the application is compliant with the ordinance that it be under the same ownership and contiguous to the property. The property is currently zoned A1 agricultural, and the sending parcel is this piece here on the screen. It's the top part here, and the receiving parcel is this bottom piece here. If you recall, we have transferred eligibilities in this general vicinity as well. This should be the last remaining eligibility in this portion here. So this part will be retained as agricultural property. The applicant did submit a site plan with the application and identified that it would be placed general vicinity in this general vicinity of the property. These parcels have been designated with eligibilities and have been sold and are in the process of being developed for housing on here as well. Again, this is a transfer of a building eligibility. So this will require a conditional use permit, but the actual building permit will be issued by staff. And this is not a subdivision, so there will be no grading, drainage review or utility or infrastructure review. It's essentially, once it's placed, it will just require a plat and then a building permit associated with it. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time. Staff did recommend approval of this application. Staff did recommend approval contingent on 4 conditions that were listed in the staff report. And so in that recommendation, staff did find that the application is in conformance with the requirements for approval. With that, I'm happy to answer questions that you have for staff at this time.
Mr. Brown, can you run through the ownership thing again, how that connects, that they are the same people?
Yeah, so I'll answer that another way too, is the applicant is ill, but I believe will be on the phone tonight. Yes. And he could better answer that question for you as far as identifying it. But in the past, we have received applications from the same, and we did require the applicant to supply us with documentation of who was part of the LLC, and he is part of both LLCs.
Okay.
And so that's the determination that it is in conformance with that requirement. But that's a question I would encourage you to ask the applicant on the phone, so we can get in the record that that's the case. So.
All right. Commissioners, any further questions of staff? Seeing none, at that time, I'll ask the applicant to come forward and talk a little bit more about their application. Oh, he's on the phone. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, could you give your name and address for us?
Yeah, this is Brett Merkel, 47236 274th Street, Harrisburg. And I'm a member of the Pente Farms LLC.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your application and what you'd like to do?
Yeah, we have the quarter section of ground that's at issue here. And when we had purchased that several years ago, there were some eligibilities as part of the purchase that were moved around. And one of the eligibilities that's on there is kind of in the middle of the quarter, which doesn't really work for selling off an eligibility just because it's kind of in a low-lying area. And so the best spot for this eligibility, we believe, would be on the corner there. So that's what we're requesting, is to move that over there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any further questions for the applicant?
Yeah, Brett, so, you're also part of the Peterson Ag LLC?
Actually, I purchased the 23 acres that this eligibility sits on. I had purchased that through a contract for deed. And so I supplied the contract for deed to Toby. And so I'm not actually a part of that LLC, but I have ownership of this land through the contract for deed with Peterson Ag. So they're the seller and I'm the buyer on that, or Pente Farms is.
And has that been registered is the land still in Peterson Ag, or is it gonna be transferred into Pente Farms?
Yeah, it will be transferred into Pente Farms.
When will you guys be closing on that or doing that?
Whenever I pay off the contract, it's a 10-year contract, and so I just haven't paid it off yet. I'm just making payments on it.
When did you enter into the contract for deed?
Oh, a couple of years ago, I think.
So technically, you could default on the contract after this is done, and they could keep ownership.
Well, actually, that's not really how it is. The eligibility was transferred over to our ground to the north of this. But when I asked Planning and Zoning to do the research on it, Jen said there was some confusion as to where this eligibility sat. And so rather than try to go back and trace it all back, it just didn't matter to me. I thought, well, let's just go to the hearing and present it and let it be moved. Because whether it's on the piece north of this that Pente Farms owns or whether it's on the Peterson Ag piece, didn't matter to me as long as it got moved.
Well, but you understand that it matters to us because currently there's a piece of ground in between the two Pente Farms that isn't yours, and so it doesn't really fit the description that they connect.
Well, the eligibility is actually on our ground. It's not supposed to be on the Peterson Ag ground, but rather than make an issue of it, it's a lot easier just to run it through this way. I mean, it's actually Pente Farms eligibility. It's not Peterson Ag eligibility because I bought it from them 10 years ago. So the only reason it's sitting on this 23-acre piece that I bought later, it's actually not sitting on there. It's just there was confusion as to where it ended up.
Well, I guess that's not how it's being presented to us here.
See, on our end, in our ordinance, it says you have to own both pieces of property, the same owner. When you transfer from one property to another property, you have to own both of them.
Well, I do own it. It's a contract for deed.
But it's
You
not.
can't say. Wait a minute. You can't say that if I default on it because there is no legal determination that I've ever defaulted on it. I mean, that's nonsensical. As long as I got the contract, it's mine. I own it.
But it's not platted to you.
What does that matter? I got a contract that says I own it, whether it's a contract for deed or not. All it's doing is it's passing through from Pente Farms to Peterson Ag, which I own, to Pente Farms again. That's all it's doing.
All right, Commissioners, any further questions for the applicant? All right, thank you for your time. At this time, I'll ask anyone in support of the application to come forward. All right, I will ask anyone in opposition of the application to come forward. Seeing none, I will close the floor to public input, and we will ask a motion from the commission so we can discuss and ask some more questions.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve just for discussion
Second.
with the conditions that were listed, excuse me.
All right, we have a motion second to approve with the 4 conditions. Discussion.
Toby, can you clarify for us the rule, I guess, on having contiguous pieces and how that allows them to move those around?
Well, the requirement is that it be contiguous under the same ownership, and that we do allow, if it's an LLC, that there would be, as long as there was a party associated with it. And this goes back to Joan. This wasn't Jen that was involved in this, but, when I'm looking at the correspondence here, is we did ask if they have common ownership. And so I assume that the common ownership was with Peterson Ag, because Peterson Ag is when we look at the ownership of it, it's Peterson Ag. Granted, there's a contract for deed with it. But I guess the question would be does a contract for deed meet the requirements for contiguous ownership?
Of course it does. I'm fully legally responsible for that piece of ground. I own it. If anything were to happen on that piece of ground, Peterson Ag has nothing to do with it. Just read the contract. I get all the cash rents off of it. I get all the good and all the bad.
Toby, do we have any precedence with this, with the contract for deed? Has this ever come up?
Well, I know we've transferred with Penty and with Peterson Ag, correct, Brent?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Brent, have you
I
seen?
don't believe we did it in this situation, though. I think the one that we did before, he had purchased a little piece of ground from Peterson Ag with the eligibilities on, and then we moved them across the road, I believe is how it went.
You know, another option might be we do table it for 1 month while our legal looks into it and does make a determination if contract for deed is legal ownership, or you actually have to have the, you know, legally switch over to your name.
Yeah, I guess I can probably see it both ways, but currently I don't feel that the way it's set up, meets the rules. So, if we had to vote on it tonight, I'd vote no. I'd rather see it tabled.
Well, I guess, you know, to clarify from staff's position is that I was of the understanding that he was a member of the Peterson Ag LLC.
Correct.
That's where I understood it to be. So there is a question that if we table it, yes, staff could research this a little bit further to see where it's at. But again, a contract for deed, though, he is correct. He does have legal responsibility over the property. So, but I guess.
I mean, that's all the ordinance is looking for.
Hey,
They
Brett.
just don't want you
Brett,
passing from.
we'll just hold on here a second. We're having some discussion. We'll ask you questions if we have them. But currently we're having discussion amongst us.
So on my end too, I have no problem moving it. It's just, are we legally allowed to do it within, you know, moving it, I don't have an issue with it, but if it doesn't match our ordinance and it's not right, then we can't do it.
Well, we definitely, from staff perspective, we want to clarify it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't how I presented it to you, because it was my understanding that he was a part of that, which would be that. But if it is, we'll clarify that and we'll address it. But you know, I
Well, could
think
we use that as one of the conditions of approval, saying that we approve it as long as it meets the requirements of ownership?
well, but then we shouldn't approve it if it doesn't meet the requirements. So I guess I think a table a month and we can get to the bottom of it and figure it out. So. But that's
Yeah, I
it's
agree,
up to the
'cause
board. It's up to the board, I guess.
It'd be like, one of the conditions would be like you have to put up so much fence, and then if he doesn't put up the fence, and then, you know, we have to research that and then wait a year and. So, yeah, we have a motion to approve on the table. I'm going to make a motion to table
I'll second.
for a month. Good. All right, any discussion on the motion to table? All right, again, I said I don't have an issue with moving it, it's just make sure we're doing it the right way. So, all right, with that, we'll do roll call on the motion to table. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. Thank you very much. Item number 3, Mr. Brown.
Okay, item number 3, this is an application for a conditional use permit to allow a contractor's storage shop on the property. Property address is 47023 Smith Circle. It's approximately 0.74 miles southeast of the city of T. Property is currently zoned C commercial. Property is currently utilized as a landscaping business. There was a conditional use permit that was issued to the property in the past to allow for replacement of a shed on the property. That was the only one historically that we could find on the property. Again, a warehousing type structure that was permitted on the structure on the property would be allowed as a staff identified that the use of it is more aligned to a contractor shop and storage yard. Parcel size is approximately 2.09 acres in size. Again, the proposed use of this would be a contractor shop for a landscaping business. The applicant did submit a site plan with the application. Again, the application identified that there's existing structures on the property that are utilized by the landscaping business, and the landscaping business is proposing to add an addition onto the property. Once, if the conditional use was approved, then staff would issue a building permit for the expansion of the structure. Staff did post property, and the applicant did send letter notification to surrounding property owners. As of today, we haven't heard anything from surrounding property owners or any concerns or issues. Staff and the staff analysis did find that the application is consistent with the zoning requirements for the subject property and the subject use. Staff does, if approved, recommend that it be contingent on the four contingencies or conditions that were placed in the staff report. With that, we have any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions? Oh, yeah, any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to come forward and tell us about their application.
How we doing tonight? Jason Gramberg Landscaping, 47023 Smith Circle. We're just a landscape concrete company. We do most of our business off-site. We don't have customers coming to our property most of the time. Most everything is done off-site. So basically we're using it for storage, trucks. Obviously there's a lot of theft going on, so we want to try to get more of our equipment inside, not have it outside, people digging around. Basically we're just trying to clean up the area, make it more usable so we don't have so much clutter, you know, to better our property is basically the whole thing. Try to make things more spread out so it's not just things everywhere, you know, clutter. That's the biggest thing, you know, making things better. That's what we're trying to do. So the original shop that we have now, basically, we have the offices, the big building is the shop, and then we have the offices. The new addition would basically just be a kind of a cold storage for now. Down the road, we may finish it, heat it, use it for maintenance and stuff like that. But that's kind of the goal now, is just to get it. We cleaned up everything, got all our stuff cleaned up, but now we just need more places to put our equipment and stuff. We're just getting to the point where we're growing, and we want to be able to store things inside. So.
Yep, understood. Good. Yeah, color, keeping it clean.
Yeah, that's the goal.
I can appreciate
you guys
that.
probably know Smith Circle quite a bit. It's kind of a lot of people kind of do whatever over there. In the past years, I've noticed. I've owned the property for 7 or 8 years, and I've always just wanted to try to clean things up, and so we have a nice property, and you know, increase the value. I know the concrete plants are going to do big deal over there. They're working on doing a big remodel and stuff, so just trying to make things better over there and be able to make our business function better in that order, you know. So.
Understood. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant, Jason? See you none. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will ask anybody in support of the application to come forward and speak. All right, I will ask anybody in opposition of the application to come forward and speak. All right, seeing none, I will close the floor to public input, and I'll ask the commission for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve with the 4 conditions.
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. Discussion, commissioners. All right, I think everyone's good. We'll do roll call. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. Good luck. All right, with that, that's all of our public hearings. We have new business, one item. Mr. Brown, you want to speak on that?
So we, again, appreciate everyone coming tonight for the work session. I think it was beneficial and productive. If we had more time, it'd be nice to do one every month, but we'll make it work, so. The other item that I want to talk quick about is, we placed on your desk before the meeting this evening is the planning and zoning calendar for next year. And so we do actually, we set that essentially, or we check tonight to see if there's any conflicts with it. And so it's our typical, the joint jurisdictional meeting is always the second Wednesday of every month. And so the regular meeting of the planning commission by rule is always the third Monday of every month. But there is on occasion, if you'll look at the calendar, I believe January and February, where we'll have a holiday that conflicts with the meeting schedule. And then so the bylaws that you've adopted state that if a holiday falls on a meeting date, then that meeting date goes to the next day, which is Tuesday. And so that does conflict, of course, with the cities because they do the same thing, meetings and things like that. But this is by practice what we've always done, and by our bylaws what we've always done. But I wanted to point that out and see if there's any questions or concerns with that you have as a group. But otherwise, it just the rest of the calendar just follows our typical meeting date per the bylaws. So.
Yeah, I see no problems with moving it.
Okay.
That's our rules, and that's what we do.
Yep.
Okay, so that'll be the calendar. We'll put that on the website, and that'll be the official calendar for next year then. With that, no other new business for you this evening, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Everyone's good. Next thing is adjournment. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Against? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone.